time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly, Newman, and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Welcome back to another round of Brandy. Scott and I are talking about rebel brands today, and the brands that really do stand out by being different and being daring in many ways.
Yeah, and even just the I don't know why rebel seemed to be an appropriate name for this episode, because you know, when you think of a rebel, you don't necessarily think of someone that's like, you know, destroying things. It's not a vandal. It's a rebel. If there's someone that is, you know, pushes back against the norms, what either society dictates this is what you should do or should not do, and they buck against that. You know, we think of the classic James Dean, you know, it was like, well, back then the greased hair, the motorcycle, the leather jacket, that was very counterculture in the 50s, which dictated much more clean cut conservative dress and hairstyle and everything else. And so any of those, every generation we've had those that are kind of the deems just kind of rebellious ones, and so there's brands that do that. And when we mean by being rebellious, we mean finding ways to go against the grain, to go against the flow, go upstream when everyone else is going downstream.
Yeah, and it's not so much as being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious, of just doing the opposite. Because to me, that's like, there's no strategy in that. That's easy and that's lazy. Rather, it's like, I like the word contrarian in the sense of you're either having a contrarian point of view about something, or an approach or method, the way you go about something. And that, to me, is what these brands do, whether it's in their brand, their marketing, and advertising, or even their business models, that they have a different approach and a different point of view to maybe a market or industry that could have been existing for decades. And then they're just taking a different approach that then really does appeal to a certain like audience within that. And that's where I'm like, this starts to connect the dots between these brands that are successful, and then they just really kind of trailblaze from there and go off on their own. Whether it is, you know, it could be a household brand name, or even some celebrities we know, or, you know, artists who have just taken off because they've decided to try something different and do something that's outside of the norm or standard.
And a lot of times those brands that do something different and stand out so much, sometimes are the trendsetters among brands, where all of a sudden now other brands are starting to pop up. They're now doing what they're doing, or doing it the way they're doing it. And so a lot of times when you think of something, eventually their distinctiveness kind of goes away because they were so good at it that they have to, you know, now other people are doing it. But if it's done well, they always know that they were the OG. They were the original brand that did that.
That's true.
Here's an example that came to mind of like kind of the trendsetter would be an obscure market sector like pizza, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, pizzerias, dime a dozen, and most pizza brands, you go in, you buy, you know, the way you buy your pizza, it's by the number of toppings. You want 1 topping, 2 topping, 3 toppings, or they have a couple combos and specialty pizzas, and they're all baked in, packaged, priced differently, right? And they're all gauged by the number of toppings and stuff. And so then, you know, a brand that was Blaze Pizza that dictated almost not a self-serve, but it was kind of like how you'd have a almost cafeteria style, where you would go down the line with the person and they would be, you know, what kind of cheeses? Well, I want both, and can I have extra and a little less of this, and what kind of toppings? And it wasn't based on. It's more of almost like a buffet style approach, where you could have a set price, and that person eats like a bird, or you have the person that eats enough for 2 people. And in between, the business is making their money because, you know, they're hoping that not every person is going to be maxing out their food portion. And so that's where they're able to be sustainable. But they changed. They were a first pizza place that was flat charge. So whether you got a cheese pizza or whether you had one with 20 toppings on it, right? Same price. And so it allowed you to fully customize it, not be like, oh, I'm sorry, no, we can't put a little extra sauce, that's going to cost you extra. And it wasn't nickeled and dimed, and it became very customized. And then from there, that became popular, and that they really stood out for that. And then other places like Pyology, and there's a couple other brands that have popped up that do the same type of thing. It's kind of that, much like what Chipotle does and what Subway does, where you're building as you go, right?
Yeah.
But no other pizza place. That's pizza. That's not how pizzas are done.
Yeah.
You order, they go back and make it, and they put it on there. You don't walk through how they're putting together. The next evolution would be for a pizza place to come around and go, hey, here's some gloves, and now you're on. It's like a salad bar. You're building your own salad. Here, you're going to construct your own pizza, right? And then you hand it off to us. We'll have it baked. But there's ways to do that, and maybe that's the next thing. You want to go into?
You get to throw it up in the air.
Yeah. You want to go into the pizza business, Reilly?
That would be interesting. Yeah. I have noticed that pizzas have been shrinking. That's a whole other issue, though. I feel like a large is not as big as it used to be.
They have been shrinking, yes, but the waistline doesn't from all that pizza.
Yeah. And that's a good example, because it is like you have this, like you said, the model. That's what really differentiated these brands like Blaze and Subway, Chipotle. The brand was really they're not completely, rebellious in a sense of doing something that's completely counter what their industry is doing, but the model and how they approached that and how they attacked that was the edge. And then that model, just like we always say, is like brand and business are so intertwined that it does bleed over to the brand, because that perception, that's what people talk about. They go, oh, it's that pizza place where you can build your own pizza. You get to walk down the thing. Or even like when Subway started doing it, or Chipotle, that was part of the perception and the brand and what people talked about. It was the distinction of what made them special. And you see that in a lot of different industries as well. And like a local like favorite, or one that is in a lot of headlines, is like Liquid Death. And their play to me is much more brand and marketing versus them innovating something about water, really. Sure, it's in an aluminum can that's different and special, but it's not like they have some...
You can't see the water.
You can't see the water. That's different. But it's not like they have some proprietary, they ionize the water in some special way.
Yeah.
And there are some brands that do that. But Liquid Death was mainly like they just did a very contrarian approach to the packaging, to the brand, to the messaging, through and through.
Yeah. That's a brand that, for many people, they even at sight of the packaging, you don't know it's water.
Yeah, it's almost shocking.
And for a lot of people, and even everything goes counter, right? Rebels against what all the other water brands were doing and are doing.
Yeah.
And they were targeting a very specific audience. It wasn't like they were trying to be for the appealing to the masses, because the imagery, the name, everything about it really leaned into the rebel, the rebel crowd to begin with. It was almost like, if you're a rebel, this is the water for you. We are the Rebel water brand, so there's your association and brand allegiance that can come from something like that.
Yeah, and I heard it was in an article, and I forgot the artist, but he would, because they would be sponsored by like a beer brand, and so he would have to have the beer can on stage with him, and he would get sick of having to drink beer all the time and while he's playing, and he would actually sometimes empty out the beer can and fill it up with water, so he could still have the product placement, be out there, and just be drinking water. And he was actually one of the founding guys behind Liquid Death, because he wanted to create something that fulfilled that need. And I can't remember his name, but he started rolling this out, and then he's like, why isn't there a water where I can be on stage and not just have an Aquafina bottle or something where it's like just like a plastic bottle, but have like a cool can that fits the vibe of seeing a live show, his style of music, and what the people are wanting. And it relates
into
to
their lifestyle.
People. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm like,
and brands that fit into your audience's lifestyle become lifestyle brands.
Yeah, and it's just become like a really, like a fan favorite in so many ways. And to me, it's like, yeah, they didn't have a big change on the model of it. It's still water, and now they're starting to do some expansion on product extensions. But now it's like, no, that was a full just brand and marketing. And they have that funny commercial with Ozzy Osbourne now, and just things like that, where it's like, think about it, a water company doing a commercial with Ozzy. Like, that's so like you would have never thought that. Like Arrowhead, like
yeah.
And like down the alcohol lane, there's another brand that came to mind that I thought was doing things really different, was Athletic Brewing, which they've taken an interesting stance where they not only lean into the brewing style and the brewing co. and just really like beer cliches, but then they're all non-alcoholic, and they've just taken off like crazy. And they hit a certain point in the market where, you know, it may be someone who, they want to feel like they're drinking a beer, have the great taste and quality, but not have some dorky brand.
Well, and a lot of it too is like, for instance, they get like, they're really, a buddy of mine drinks them because he doesn't drink. And it's like, you think of non-alcoholic beers, it's like O'Doul's or something like that is more of a light lager style, Pilsner style, like those are the ones. But when you get into like the heavy hazy IPAs and you know, things that just that really lean into the more the craft microbrew, very hoppy, you don't think non-alcoholic. And you know, you look at all their sub brands within the athletic brewing family, and you know, you've got an IPA, you got a hazy IPA, you got all these different you know lanes for the more discerning beer drinker that maybe is either taking a break or quitting, but wants to still enjoy the flavor and the taste that they've all come to love. And it's a lot of the other lane of beers that you know, a non-alcoholic one wasn't really residing in strongly.
Yeah, and I think they nailed the market on it for sure. Because there could be, like you said, someone who does just want the flavor without always having to, you know, have the intake of alcohol. And to me, it's like that's something really interesting where you're taking a market and you're just challenging the market of going like, okay, what's the category of beer? How do you shave off something, you know, someone that specific person who is, you know, maybe they're wanting to wean off alcohol, they're just not drinking as much anymore, but they still love the flavor. They still consider themselves a beer connoisseur, right? What happens to that person? And I think they address that really nicely, and now they just got like a huge valuation that is much
I was just
bigger.
thinking too, I know you're a big fan of the brand, so maybe you can speak into this more, but I was thinking about like, okay, what about tech? Who's someone that's trying something different, or maybe reverting back again, that's making them stand out? Like, we have these such advanced smartphones that do everything for us now. They're more AI enabled, and I mean, all the things you can do with your smartphone. And now there isn't a brand going back to like stripping it down back to the functionality of a phone and maybe texting, and that's it. It's like stripping it away because we've gotten so fancy, so mega computer and these little handheld devices, and to bring it for them to like be a cell phone, you know, make, you know, brand of cell phones that is something that's slightly different. And it's not just for old people like giant buttons and here's just the emergency button, right? But they're ones, right? You've been tracking a brand
phones or something, and there's been several brands that come out, and they really just doing like a more minimalistic phone, and it's stripped down in that way where it's like, okay, it might not have social media, but it has texting, maps, all that, and images and stuff like that. But that to me is like, okay, you have them doing that where they're shaving off a sliver in the smartphone market about more of this kind of disciplined phone, where someone just doesn't want distractions. And to me, that's super interesting because that even appeals to me. I get sick of having an iPhone sometimes. And then you do have one cell phone brand that I love, which I think you're thinking about, is Nothing. And they are a new brand, but they're doing a really interesting approach to not only their identity, but also the way they're going about their product design and through of how they're actually communicating and kind of representing the phones in a lot of ways, where they're doing, you know, transparent bodies on the phone, so you see the inside of it, and then they have these really cool product photography with reptiles and beetles and stuff like that, where it's super interesting. You just don't see things like it, and just their approach is like it's very simple. Yeah, no, it is. And it's crazy seeing someone, they're going, you know, head to head with Apple now, where it's like this rebellious, you know, response to Apple, where Apple was the OG of that in that space. And then what's really interesting about them is that they've now created a sub brand that's more about a more cost-effective phone where you can change modules on it on the exterior and adjust certain things about it, and that just started rolling out. And they're challenging so many different ways, and even that approach, I'm like, it's genius that they have this umbrella brand, and then they release this more cost-effective sub brand that was then rolled out with headphones, phone, all those other devices, and so they're protecting their position because the nothing actual phones are actually still fighting against, or they're going against with Android and Apple and all that. But I think even there, it's like it shows that you can approach product design, you can approach the brand and do it from a different perspective. Like we were saying, point of view.
Yeah.
Or like we've talked about in other episodes, it's like narrative. It's the same sort. Like they're saying the same thing. They're talking about phones, and now the narrative they have a different narrative for it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's that distinction.
Even trying something new that, again, it's like being aware of what all the rest of the competition is doing and saying, you know what, let's take a little risk, right? Let's try something a little bit off the beaten path. And another example comes to mind is McDonald's. And back in the 80s, this is before your time, Reilly, but back in the 80s, I remember, I don't have the exact, I haven't like preface this by researching the exact launch year of the campaign, but hamburgers were run of the mill. Everybody was putting out together hamburgers, and mostly the staple was you get your burger, your cheese, and you maybe some pickles and some chopped onion and 2 condiment, ketchup and mustard, whatever. And that was your standard. And then the Big Mac, McDonald's had a little bit of shredded lettuce, and that was it. Well, they came out with the McBLT, and it was basically wanting to basically have a lot more, like a big couple, wedges of, or not wedges, but leaves of iceberg lettuce, crisp, cold iceberg lettuce, thick slice cut tomato, and maybe some onion. But it was basically tomato and a lot of lettuce that never made it on fast food hamburgers, because by the time you got them and they were all wrapped up and the customer got that, whether they're eating it in the car or taking it to go, it was wilted because of the heat of the burger and the packaging and putting this hot, hamburger together. It got all wilted. So they devised packaging so that there was a hot side and a cold side. And on the hot side of the packaging was your hamburger patty and maybe with melted cheese and your bottom bun. And on the other half was the top bun with your cold crisp lettuce and your big tomato, and I think there's maybe onion on or not. But and then you basically have these two together, but they designed the 2 separate packaging to separate them, so you could go home and your cold is still cold and the hot's still hot, and you throw this in. And no other fast food place was doing that. Yeah. And it lasted for a while, right? But it was a big hit at first, and everyone was talking about it because no one else was doing it. Yeah, so again, it's even little things. You don't have to like completely reinvent how you do business, right? Yeah. But if you're going to do something, is there a way that you could do it that is different than other people? Yeah. And even if it's something for 6 months, your brand is going to gain a little more traction and be recognized for doing things a little bit differently, which make it stand out and be distinctive.
And that's what's like, whether you're a service or a product, it's like having that point of view and being unique in that way. And that even reminds me, because like really what McDonald's did is like you're changing the experience, the engagement with the product for the betterment of the customer and their enjoyment of it. And that reminds me of even like with IKEA, what they're known for is like you enter their giant buildings and it's a totally different shopping experience of what you experience at other places, because they develop these little showrooms that change per room. It's like you're inside someone's house and you're going, from room to room, you're experiencing it, and everything's marked with the price, and it's all set up like someone lives there. And now brands are starting to copy that because it's so darn successful, and people just you start seeing yourself with the products. They're not just, lined up on the shelf, a bunch of chairs or something. And it's like, no, it's so different. And just that alone is like the IKEA brand that, it's blue and yellow, big yellow text, big blue building. It's like it's not totally off the wall and different and rebellious, but the way they go about the shopping experience, that's completely different and completely bold and stands out. And kind of like we talk about, it's like the school of fish mentality. It's like so many businesses, especially small businesses, they get so scared where they just, I got to stick, like, what are these other businesses doing? What's my competition doing? And they stay within those lines and those boundaries, or what they see as like the expectation for their industry and kind of what they think they should be doing. And they never step out.
You brought up a good point, because being rebel involves taking risk. It means, potentially, it's a risky move. There's look at nature. You know, there's safety in numbers, right? That's why there's herds. That's why there's packs. That's why animals know that there's a little bit safety when they are among a herd. And if one gets scattered away from the herd, it's more vulnerable. It stands out more.
Yeah, it gets picked off.
Right? It in the field of view, looking at a prairie, you've got a herd, and then you've got one or two that are out away from the herd. They stand out. So from a brand standpoint, right, it's effective, but it's also risky because you're taking risks that maybe will resonate with an audience, maybe they won't. Right. And there's a reason people kind of look around and do what everyone else is doing. It's because it's safe.
Yeah.
And it's on average, and that is why not every brand or business is a rebel, being rebellious in some form, to stand out, to be different, because it's scary. It's uncertain, and just look at nature.
Right. Close your eyes and you think about each industry. You think of wine, or you think of beer, or you think of, tech or something, and you can imagine what the brand would look like. If you just imagine a wine bottle, you can start imagining what it looks like. And it's just because it's based off of all these averages that we've come to know, just because of the kind of gravitational pull towards that middle of the bell curve, where you do get the people, everyone kind of following line, staying within the pack and just doing the same thing and speaking the same language. And the ones who do stand out are the ones who they are daring enough to actually challenge the status quo,
right,
and do something that is contrarian.
That average, and again, why even like Big Surge right now utilize AI to help develop your brand or further develop your brand, whether it's advertising, slogans, whatever it is. Like, it's just, again, it's the power of AI is that it delivers what you expect, because it knows what you would expect, because that's what the mass expects. That's what everyone expects.
It's predictive.
So the AI works very much in the herd.
Yep.
That's where it thrives, is in the herd.
Yeah.
And so, again, we talk a lot more about AI and when to safely use it and how to use it, in our industry in another podcast. But that just, it leans into this subject matter.
Oh no,
right?
It's almost even more so. You should be looking for ways to stand out, because like AI is the aggregate of the average. Like it's predictive, because it can predict the average of, if I told you to think of a ketchup bottle, I can kind of guess what you're going to think about right now. Or if I told you to think of a soda bottle, I can kind of guess the shape of the soda bottle because of Coke's, propaganda and helping us think of that. Or Heinz's, classic bottle shape. It's what we think about because it has become so cliche for that. And so these brands, it's about, you challenge the category. You have to. And that's what, like, there's many books about it, but about like being the category of one. And you think of successful brands, and that's what they've done. They've shaved off a sliver of a market and started just building out their own category within a market. So there is an audience, but you're just starting to do it differently, from, Warby Parker and them sending out glasses and challenging that to Blaze doing build your own pizza. Yeah. It's like, it's different, and it still makes sense, but it's still a different, a category. You're challenging it.
Yeah. And it really helps, just, standing out helps signify your brand in the market space. And by doing stuff differently, the audience they'll respond to that. They will.
And the right audience too. Just like Liquid Death, whereas like you have these people who go, oh no, that's the one for me. Or even what Southwest did when they got going, it was all about low cost. And they don't have all the random fees for, a bag or 2 bags or cancellation fees. They just threw all that out. And they focused on, how do we make this the most enjoyable experience? Which is like, why is that innovative? Like, why is focusing on the customer's enjoyment innovative? So they do that, and then they redid their logistics of having the shortest delays between flights. So they made it super efficient, where once a plane lands, it's taking off. It's always going. And so that drops costs because you have less wait time. And all these other airlines weren't doing that, and the customer paid the price. And so Southwest comes along and just like hits it out of the park. Yeah. And again, they challenge the status quo. And I think that's where it's like, you can do it in your business model. You can do it in your brand and the identity, how you present things, product design, all of that. And you can do it in, really your advertising and marketing of how you're framing the business. And that really does kind of go into, the experience of it as well in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, isn't it? What is it? Target or what? There's some company that's looking at doing like you just walk in and then you just take things and you leave and you don't have to check out. It's like it knows.
Amazon is trying to do that with the groceries.
Where it just kind of knows what you've taken and charges it to your account.
Well, it was a bit of a Amazon jumped the gun on it because it was essentially, it turned out that they had people watching cameras and they were going, oh, Scott just walked in, he grabbed this. So it wasn't even a computer doing it. And so they're starting to shut this
So
down.
it's basically it's a way to charge shoplifters.
Yeah. You just put that in his pocket. If you have a Prime account.
Yeah.
And some of these are massive, massive examples of giant brands that are international. And again, it's like for a small business, you can apply this. And like Scott said, it's like, it's not like you have to now go back to the drawing board and erase everything.
Redo everything that you do, right? Yeah.
But it's like, look for ways to just do something a little different, whether it is in your packaging or maybe the box you ship something out in, or look at your industry and look at your category and go, okay, what's very predictable about this, and
what does everyone expect? Yeah.
And then see how you could go, okay, what would enhance that, right? Or give that little extra value, because some expectations are good, but it's also like, how do I add a little bit of that surprise and delight, right?
Yeah.
And again, gosh, you think of Disney. Is that in all those little moments, you look for those chances and those opportunities to just add a little bit of that delight where it catches them off guard in a good way. And then it's that delightful little like, whoa, like, and we've all received that from a brand, is something in the packaging where you're just like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. And it's just interesting. Even like I just got an Amazon box, and for the Garfield movie, I guess there's a new Garfield movie, and the box was completely orange. It had the Amazon little smile on it, and it had the Garfield logo, but it was an orange, like Garfield orange, and I was like, oh my gosh! And it caught me I was like, wow, that's cool. Like,
what's funny is I recently ordered from Amazon. I was looking at getting a pizza peel. That's for making pizzas. Goes in a pizza oven. It's like the big flat dish on with the rod, and so you slide the pizza in, and sometimes you can turn it and rotate it. But they're called pizza peels or baking peels, but they're called peels. So anyway, I ordered one off of Amazon. It was like stainless steel, but I knew, as with most of them, almost all of them on the market, they all come in two pieces and they have two screws. So you've got the big flat piece, and then you've got the handle. You just screw with the two screws and assemble it, right? Well, I got my thing. It was like under a $20 purchase. I got my peel, and there was the bag with two screws, and there was also a screwdriver in there. And I've got tools. This is actually a really nice screwdriver, standard Phillips screwdriver that actually is now in my kitchen drawer in my kitchen. Yeah. And it was free. And I was like, okay, first of all, that's weird. I mean, you get stuff that need assembly and they don't provide the tool.
Phillips,
maybe a little, maybe a little, like an Allen wrench, right? You get that all the time, but not an actual like nice handle, black anodized. I mean, we're not talking cheap.
Yeah.
It had no brand name on it, but I was like, this is nice. And it came in the box with my 2-piece and with 2 screws product that I then assembled. And that was an added like, what?
Yeah.
Now, would I go out and like, am I a huge fan of the brand? No, but it was, again, surprise and delight, because it was a brand that I constantly had to engage with, or they had other things. I would definitely be looking, but all they do is, that I know of, is make pizza peels, and I've got one, so I'm not gonna be a repeat customer. But it stood out. It was one of those moments.
You have to I gotta go to the garage. And get a screwdriver.
Yeah, now I got one in the kitchen.
And so there's very cost-effective ways of doing it, whether it's again, your identity and your color palette, to the way you advertise, market, or in your packaging, or when you send something out, how you include it, how you actually surprise and delight in those ways. And I think that with AI, with all these crazy advancements, it's even that much more important to really focus on being distinct and looking for ways to add that value.
Yeah. Be that James Dean and stand out in the crowd.
Yeah. Don't
be the rebel.
Don't stay in the herd, please. You will blend in. But thank you again for tuning in on this episode of Brandy. We'll be back for another round.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.